What misconceptions did you have about sex when you were younger that you find laughable now? My mom is a doctor, so she brought me and my siblings up to be comfortable talking about body parts so that we would understand what was and wasn't okay for people to do. When she first told us how babies were made, I asked how people were supposed to have sex without seeing each other, since it's not okay to look at other people's private parts. 10-year-old me then went on to literally describe what I now know to be a glory hole to my parents. Well, since we're here, it was when I was on the phone to my dad staying at my uncle's house. My uncle is a pilot, so the game whenever we were there was to run an airport with paper planes and pretend to be planes and stuff. We learned a ton of cool, for 8-year-olds, stuff about airplanes and airports. Since my uncle was a pilot for Virgin Australia, until the pandemic, he was constantly drumming into our heads how bad all the other airlines were, Qantas flies backwards, etc., etc. Now on the day of the event, my dad calls halfway through a dramatic near-disaster emergency landing. Engrossed in the game, I excitedly tell my dad we're playing airports. I'm a virgin and I had a problem with my undercarriage, so I had to go in for an emergency landing. I am going to fucking die at my 21st birthday. I thought the same thing too. We had a sex education class at school when I was about 10 and our mums had to come along as well, all girls Catholic school. After the talk, we had to ask our mums any questions we had. I remember asking my mum how it could possibly work, with a man and a woman lying on top of each other, if both of our parts were between our legs. I understood that the penis got hard, but not that it stood up straight. Mum tried to avoid the question and I was insistent that she give me an answer, demonstrating my dilemma with my hands and a lip gloss to represent the penis. She was mortified. She never properly answered either. Took me a few more years to find out too. Now I'm worried a lot of girls are just taking it in the butt thinking it's doggy style when they're not ready for that. There is nothing wrong with anal sex, but I feel like you work your way up to with using fingers, lots of lube, being comfortable with the person because it can get messy. To think you're trying a new position and boom, the guy just shoves his dick in your butt and rams you from behind without warning. Yeah, I'd hate doggy style too. Dude, until I was like 13? I thought doggy style was anal. Like, everyone's making so many jokes about it and everything, and it's pretty much the only position that's mentioned, and I'm just sitting over here like WTFFFFF, why is everyone joking about anal? That seems like a big deal. The day I realized it was not anal was a revelation, let me tell you. Guy recently heard on the radio of the exact opposite. Someone wanted to know how they tell their guy that they didn't do anal. Apparently the guy thought they did anal because they did doggy style. He was in his 40s. Not me, but a buddy from high school. The group of us all thought we had about the same understanding about the mechanics of sex. Apparently that was not the case. This buddy of ours gets himself into a relationship and he and his girl are about to take it to the next step. The first time they have sex, he apparently stopped midway through with a strange look. When his girlfriend asked him what's wrong, he told her he wasn't sure how he was going to get his balls in there too. I'd pay money to see the look on her face after that. What's wrong? Well, I can't figure out how I'm gonna fit my balls in there. There simply isn't enough room, and the angle is way off. I really wanna see like an amazing professional actor say that as straight as possible now. Imagine if there was a YouTube channel where they would do like 5 seconds long videos that were super well produced, like it looks like it was cut from an actual film, but with them saying weird, out of context comments like this. I started sexual education around age 8 and at the end of every session we were given paper to write down questions we wanted answered. I remember asking this question as my first ever question. It was brushed off by the teacher who gave an answer that left me even more confused, and went unanswered for me until I was much older. I asked, in much less eloquent words, when a woman has ejaculate inside of her, there is a lot of sperm that aren't successful, what happens to that? I had seen the anatomy. I knew the cervix had to be breached. We were shown silhouette-style graphics of knob to cervix transfer of semen. So I figured lots made it through. I didn't think you would keep every load you received between periods up there. But what happened to it? Turns out sex is really messy. Took very little searching online to scar the immediate loss of my naive innocence into my memory forever. Close one, it's Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. I also heard of that, and I personally think it's only a rumor since giving heirs to the kingdom was at the absolute top of the priorities at the time and people would have explained it to them so that they wouldn't screw it up. I'm not sure about Louis XVI, but there are testimonies about his great-great-grandfather Louis XVI having his first intercourse around 14 with the Baronne de Beauvais, 40 years old and rumored to be one-eyed, under the order of the Queen Mother, Anne of Austria, for that very reason. Although, even if we're pretty sure that Louis and Marie Antoinette knew what they were doing, their first child was born after 8 years of marriage. So, how to explain this? Well, there are reports of the king having a severe case of phimosis that made sex or even erections painful. They waited as much as possible to operate the king since there was always the risk of him dying in the process, but they eventually did, and 4 princes and princesses were born in the following years. I write all of this only through memory, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. According to my school's sex lessons, masturbation will eventually lead to falling off hands and decrease in IQ. It's also impossible to have sex before getting married. If you get pregnant before getting married, you probably watched too much porn or are a masturbation addict. Oh, and of course you can have safe sex using condoms, but they're unnatural and will land you in hell for using them. Just look at those anime cartoons. The best contraceptive is pulling out, but of course you shouldn't ever need it since sex equals murder. Since sperm cells are possible children anytime you have sex and don't get your partner pregnant, you essentially murder them. Also, you should confess at church and donate. Maybe God will forget you for being a filthy murderer. Of course, if you masturbate, He won't forget, you filthy murderer that enjoys killing children. Ideally, a married couple with 2 children only ever had sex 2 times and never had to live in sin. Of course, penis, sex and vagina are bad and forbidden words, so don't you dare ask questions. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why you don't let fanatics of Catholic Church run sex lessons. I swear the first time my friends tricked me into watching hentai, I learned more about sex than in a whole year of that education. I used to play the original version of The Sims quite a lot back in 2001 when I was 12. I used to think in order for a woman to become pregnant, they had to make out over and over until bam, pregnant. That's how it worked in the game. I thought that's how it worked in reality as well. Until a few months later, a school counselor gave us, a group of 7th grade boys, the talk. I always wondered why my sister laughed when the Sims would play in the vibrating heart-shaped bed. 12-year-old me thought they were just wrestling and being silly. Then when I was maybe 14, I found out some more details about sex and I freaked out. That I would have to be, gasp, naked in front of my partner and my partner would be naked too. No duh. Interestingly enough, when I was 10 or 11, we got my first dog, and that's when I learned about when female dogs are in heat and they had to get spayed so they don't end up having puppies. I kind of made a joke about the male dog next door magically getting our dog pregnant, since I still didn't really know how that worked. I didn't realize that both our dogs would have to actually have sex. I thought, just the mere presence of the male dog would have magically gotten ours pregnant. And yes, I knew pregnancy lasted 9 months and the baby didn't pop out of nowhere in a colorful cloud of smoke. I used to think that the urethra and the vagina were the same hole. I thought, I only have 2 holes, so it's the same for girls without the penis and balls, right? It made me having so much misconceptions about how sex was done on a physical matter. Like I thought people could have sex through the fly of their trousers since the lady's hole was supposed to be where the penis is. So when I watched porn for the first time, I legitly thought they were doing anal until I finally went on Wikipedia to see how it worked and I learned that girls were strange creatures with 3 holes. Also, since urethra and vagina were the same hole, I thought periods were just literally pissing blood once a month, so I didn't understand the point of pads and tampons since in my head you just had to go to the toilet when you had to and just let it go. Of course I had sex ed, but it was more on how it happens inside than how it gets out, which I understand since that part is directed to girls who I hope already know what a vagina is. For some time when I was 7 to 8 I thought that both males and females had something called penis. I also persuaded my cousin to think the same thing. We used to play a game in which you would come up with short stories by writing in turns on a piece of paper without knowing what the other had written above you. Of course, being the protagonists always a boy and a girl, most stories ended with some kind of sexual innuendo, even though we knew close to nothing about sex. At some point I had one of these stories that ended with the girl falling off a cliff, but the penis, M, was attached to the penis, F, and the boy managed to save her. My mom found that piece of paper some days later. She had a good laugh, then called me downstairs, sat me down and finally explained that only males have penises. DW, sexual assault. This is honestly so weird, I'm sorry. I wouldn't say it was so much a misconception but an uninformed dream I had. When I was maybe 8 to 9, for some reason somehow in a conversation my mom was trying to explain stranger danger and rape and stuff. I asked why would anyone rape someone because I didn't understand sex felt good or anything. I was like, there's no way it's enjoyable, so why would you do it in the first place, let alone force someone due to it? She just said I'd understand when I got older. I was left wondering why TF anyone would ever want to have sex so bad to the point they'd force someone else to do it, without really knowing what sex even was besides something physical adults did with each other. That night I had a dream a man was trying to stick his outie belly button into my innie belly button. All that stranger danger talk left me with nightmares, thanks Mom. Now knowing what sex is, it's crazy to me how my dream, more like nightmare, somehow had some symbolic aspects of it. When I was about 7 or 8, one of my parents' friends gave me a coffee table book called One Earth. It was full of glossy photographs from around the world, most of them illustrating some kind of environmental or social topic. One of them was a picture of healthcare workers giving a demonstration of proper condom use, by rolling them onto a banana. For some reason, the angle of the photo made it appear that one of the participants' fingers was sticking directly out of the banana, almost like it had grown from the banana itself. Little me somehow got the idea that condoms meant some kind of futuristic technology that would let you grow human body parts on things like bananas, for transplant. Not like I believed a little latex sleeve could do that, I interpreted condoms to be a totally abstract notion, like cloning or genetics. It freaked me the hell out and I didn't want to read that book anymore. Luckily, I managed to learn what a condom actually was, years before I ever needed to use one. When I was 11 and my brother was 9, we were staying over at my dad's fiancee's house and she only had her bed and a pull-out sofa bed. With my dad and my soon-to-be stepmom staying in her bed, my brother and I were left with the pull-out sofa bed. I was fine with the idea until it was super late at night and I started crying and freaking out because I was afraid that if I slept in the same bed as my brother, he would get me pregnant. So like at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, my dad and soon-to-be stepmom had to teach me about needing to have sex to get pregnant, and that I wouldn't get pregnant just by sleeping in the same bed as my brother. That story still gets used against me to this day. This'll probably be buried, but when I was like 10ish I thought that a sex offender was someone that didn't want sex. As a kid, I totally thought I was gonna go to prison once I was old enough to be allowed to have sex. I also thought that rape required a knife at one point or another. I thought girls just had a sort of slit that you pushed the tip of your penis against, and wished that you could put the whole thing in. I of course found out that you actually could and was pretty psyched about that. I thought girls got no pleasure out of sex, but still felt like I would need to have a big dick to impress a girl. I also thought it was a really shitty deal for women to just suffer through it. I found out that girls could have orgasms too when I was about 14 and suffice to say I was over the moon about that one. I think the worst misconception though is thinking that it was impossible for a girl to be bad at sex. Like, all she would have to do is show up. It turns out that they can be lazy and selfish just like men can. I was always told that having sex is the only way to keep a relationship healthy and shit. That everyone has sexual attraction to someone and sex is a thing that everyone will have. In schools, asexuality doesn't exist and it pisses me off that we aren't educated enough about it.